I'm here in the Dev Days conference in Lithuania, and with me, Krasimir, a founder of Kikimora, a startup that has a very ambitious willing. Your startup wants to get security accessible for developers. Isn't it a little ambitious?
Yeah, actually, it's quite realistic, I would say, because nowadays the biggest issue is that developers are thinking about usability, scalability of the code, and making it more convenient and more beautiful for the actual user, right? But a lot of people are actually not thinking about the security perspective of the things. And if you have a software, usually you have a lot of interconnected softwares, you have a bunch of APIs, you have a lot of container and Kubernetes stuff, and nobody thinks about security. So what happens when you actually have your software compromised? Well, guess what? You don't have a software anymore. So it's like I had a beautiful product, but somebody hacked my company resources, which means that I don't have users anymore, I don't have data. So I think security should come by design. There should always be a balance between usability and security, but let's think about security and how to make it throughout the whole software development lifecycle. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I also, in the field of making security loved by developers, we are developing an authorization product, and I want to hear your opinion. What is the practical way? What is your best practices to make developers love security?
I think developers should utilize security throughout the whole software development lifecycle, and I think it should be in the form of game. For example, if we look at threat modeling, for example, there is a bunch of tools out there which are helping you to model your application based on real-time use cases, and you can play games to make your threat model more meaningful and more practical. Usually that's a great thing to do because you also understand better how your application works, what's the logical boundaries, where the data comes from and where it goes. So how does it go through the different layers from the front end to the back end and so on. So on the one side, it's helping developers to actually better understand how their application works in general for the end user. And on the other side, they can play a game where they can model their threat and vulnerability landscape, and they can actually make it more meaningful for the company.
Yeah, so in the morning, I participated in a panel that you participated too about AI and security. Do you think AI is a chance for developers to do better security, or it's create more vulnerabilities?
Oh, there is always this thing, is AI going to kill the people, and how do we cope with this one? At the end of the day, AI is just something, a creature that we're feeding with some food, with some data, right? So it very much depends on the food we're feeding this creature with. So if we feed it with proper food, it's going to take care after us. It's going to help us to automate a lot of things. I cannot even imagine developing a software code without AI nowadays, right? It's so much into our lives already. It's so much part of the everyday routine that you simply cannot not have it. So you need to have it. I think it's not a scary thing. We just need to be careful what data we're feeding and what are we allowing it to do, right? But it can be a great automation for every single developer out there.
You also discussed about how do you use AI to make security easier for developers. Did you want also to?
So over the time we saw that companies are dealing with so much vulnerabilities, like hundreds of thousands of vulnerabilities sometimes, right? And this is not usable. You cannot work with this data. How can you actually remediate 30,000 vulnerabilities? An average Windows system actually has like 1,000 weaknesses and vulnerabilities. So you need to use a cybersecurity triage so that you can actually remediate something, so that you can know what's the most critical 5% or 10% weaknesses in your application and infrastructure in general. You can only do this right now, by my opinion, by actually utilizing threat intelligence feed, combining this one with the actual infrastructure and how secure is your infrastructure, making sense of how exposed your assets are to the outside world, because if they're not exposed, you doesn't have to invest a bunch of money to secure it, right? You only need to invest as much as your data is worth it. And then on top of this one, I think we also need to consider what's important for the organization. One asset is so much more important than another one. Let's consider the main application of a software development company. versus a back office printer, right? Which is more important? So does it make sense to invest the same amount of money for the one as for the other, or no, actually you're going to invest 10 times more for the first one? So when you combine these four aspects, you actually get meaningful vulnerability data for the organization.
Yeah, so you mentioned two perspectives which are nice about the security. One is how AI can create more threats, and one is how we can utilize AI to create better software. I want to take a zoom in to one of the most vulnerable surfaces, which is access control, right? We saw in the last years that authorization getting more and more place than what was before with authentication. So what do you think about this evolution? Should we care more about permissions and authorization? Should we care less about authentication? What is your opinion in that field?
So, it's all about we are actually allowing a software to use our data, to use our private data, facial components, to use our voice and biometric data. So I think people cannot read the terms and policy agreements are getting bigger and bigger. So I cannot myself read 500 pages and accept what's written in there. It will take me like a century to understand what's written in there. So we have always allowed third-party organizations to use our data, but we should be more careful. I think we should actually have some consciousness about what the company is going to do with our data. What I saw recently, by the way, is a lot of companies actually developing like AI summary tools. So you can feed 500 or 600 pages long-term terms and conditions policy, and then it will digest it for you, and it will give you a summary what you agree with in these terms and conditions. So it's just going to give you like one pager. You're agreeing and accepting that your data is going to be used for this and that purposes, right? I think these software solutions are actually coming to our society now, and there will be like some leaders in the next few months. So everybody will know what they agree with and how their data is going to be used.
Yeah, I think that's a great summary, because at one point it can create vulnerability with understanding wrong thing, but in the other angle, it can create opportunities to create much better secure software. So yeah, I'd like to conclude this interview. Thank you for being with us, and good luck with all your startup and everything.
Oh, thank you very much.